I recently came across a news clip of a man. His name is Rich Logis, I believe is how you pronounce it. And he once described himself as an unapologetic activist of the MAGA movement. And as he was talking about his experience supporting the movement and the platform, he said that I was addicted to rage, that I was always angry at somebody or something. He said, I crafted an entire persona based on lies. And he subsequently left the movement and created a whole organization called Leaving MAGA. But what stuck with me was this line, I was addicted to rage. Because what he's describing isn't just happening in MAGA, it's happening everywhere, okay? This is not just happening on the right, it's happening on the left, it's happening in so many angry spaces of the internet. People are angry all the time. And I think that this is an engineered outcome. Our algorithms are flooded with bots that stoke outrage and ire and so much anger that people are engaging from a place of ire rather than a place of logic. And I think that that's the point. When Rich described his experience, it wasn't just how he felt, it was who he was. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. Anger has a corrosive effect. And if you are not careful, it can turn you into somebody you don't recognize and somebody you don't even like. Keep watching. Hello, I'm Dr. Shantae, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Typically, what I do over here is reframe social narratives from a sociological and trauma-informed lens. So let's get into it. First of all, let me just tell you, this is not a political video. This is a video that's using politics as one example, as a framework for the bigger issue, which is the anger that you see in so many parts of the internet. I don't think that it's hyperbole to say that comments are meaner on the internet, that we have become comfortable being mean to perfect strangers on the internet, that people create these profiles and they launch these missiles at people and they are becoming these angry, mean-spirited, hurtful people. And some people are finding joy in that. Some people are finding power in that. And so this is a much larger issue. And so I want to kind of zoom out and look specifically at what is happening, because anger is one of those things that if you are not careful, it can completely reshape who you are and how you show up in the world. And psychologists typically refer to anger as a secondary emotion because shame feels vulnerable, guilt feels vulnerable, insecurity feels vulnerable. But anger means that you don't have to be vulnerable. You can be aggressive, and it shows like power, and it gives you like clarity, and it gives your brain like a not quite a hit of dopamine, but it does trigger that kind of like left frontal activation where you feel like you are operating from a place of power and purpose, right? And I think that if you are seeing this in your family, I think that if you are experiencing this where you are angry all the time, or you find yourself firing off comments that 10 years ago, this wasn't you. This wasn't your personality. This wasn't how you showed up in the world. If you are noticing this, I think it's time for a bit of self-awareness. I think it's time for a bit of self-examination. I think it's time to really kind of take a step back and ask yourself, what is happening to me? What is going on with me? Why am I so ramped up? Why am I so fired up? Why am I getting sucked in to this vortex of these emotions? And this isn't just happening to individuals, this is happening to families, okay? A lot of this anger and ire, it is destroying families, it is destroying relationships. People that were friends, or people that were in love, or people that used to have nice Thanksgiving dinners are now at each other's throats. People are opting out of dating and relationships because so much of this palpable, tangible anger and ire has infiltrated almost every aspect of society. And while there is no one size fits all solution for all of this, I do think it starts with us. I do think that it starts with each one of us kind of taking a step back and asking some questions. And so here's some questions that I want to put to you just for your consideration. Number one, what am I actually upset about? What is underneath this anger? Is it fear? Is it doubt? Is it uncertainty? Is it grief? Is it shame? Is it vulnerability? Is it insecurity? What is it? What is underneath this anger? Because anger might be what's showing up, but is that really what's going on? Number two, am I angry about something that's happening right now? Or is this something that happened before, some unhealed wound? Okay. Because a lot of what I hear in some of the angry places of the internet is things like the game is rigged, the fix is in, that society promised one thing and then it delivered something else. And there's a whole lot in that. There's a whole lot in that. Some of that is entitlement, some of that is classism, some of that is sexism and racism. So there's a whole lot in that. But some of it is just the realities of living in what you thought was a democracy, and it's turning out to be kind of like this tech feudalist oligarchy where the very, very rich have most of the things and the people in the middle are really kind of like struggling and kind of fighting it out for scraps. Okay, so in that regard, I think that there's some real meat on that bone. But in terms of who gets blamed for that, right? In terms of who bears the weight of that, somehow we have turned the finger and started pointing at one another instead of looking at the broader systems that really kind of engineer a lot of these outcomes. But I digress. Another question to ask yourself: if I strip away this anger, what's left? Is it fear? Is it grief? Is it powerlessness? Is it despair? Like if you take the anger away, if you take the mean comments away and you really strip it down, what is underneath there? What's there? And the last question, do I like who I am becoming as a result of showing up this way? Do I like who I am becoming as a result of showing up this way? If this is the new you, cool. Okay, like this is new you, new day, new chapter, and this is the garment that fits. Okay. But when you really take a step back and you think about it, do you like this version of yourself? Is this, when you think about like who you aspire to become and the kind of person that you would be and how you would show up in the world, is this really it? So let's take a step back. Let's do some self-examination. Think about those questions and the myriad ways that anger is impacting your life and your outlook. Which brings me to point number two. Anger doesn't just feel bad. Anger is corrosive because there are a lot of dog whistles out there that are appealing to not our best self, but our worst self. Okay. And I think people, without realizing it, are aligning themselves with some of the ugliest parts of the world, some of the ugliest parts of the internet, some of the darkest parts of the internet. And people that you might think that you would have never had anything in common with are somehow united in this well of grievance. And so anger isn't just how you're feeling. For a lot of us, anger is who we're becoming, okay? Like it is shaping the fabric of society to the point where it's important to zoom out because anger can make you lose sight of your intellectual clarity. Once upon a time, I had this routine. I would come home from work and I would cut on the TV and I would be listening to, MSNBC and sometimes CNN and on election night, I would be locked in, to the results and state by state and county by county and all of that. But at some point, I started to realize that a lot of these networks, a lot of these personalities were doing the same thing on the left that was happening on the right. They were invoking the same name and the same issues and the same headlines for clicks, for ratings, that it wasn't about journalistic integrity, that it was about bias and kind of like stoking the anger and the grievances of the viewers. And the pendulum of grift, okay, swings left and right. The pendulum of grift swings left and right. So if ultimately the goal is to make money, if ultimately the goal is to hold your attention, if ultimately the goal is to keep you engaged, and one of the ways to keep you engaged is to keep you angry and emotional and yeah, that's right. If it's that, then that goes both ways. So I want to say this is not just a right wing issue. This is also happening on the left side of the camp. This is also happening in the quote unquote manosphere. And so think about the ways that men and women interact on the internet, and think about all of the angry comments that you see on a day-to-day basis. And so this isn't just how we're feeling, this is who we're becoming in society. And at some point you have to zoom out and say, hold up, who's benefiting from this? Who is benefiting from this? Who's getting paid? Who's writing the checks? How does this show up at the ballot box? In what ways does this serve interests that don't serve me? And so this is where we have to kind of zoom out and not just look at how we feel, but also looking at the way that this is impacting relationships and the corrosive effects and who you find yourself agreeing with and aligning with. And when people are angry and emotional, they are easier to manipulate. I want to repeat that. When people are angry and emotional, people are easier to manipulate. I will admit this. I will own this. I am not proud of it. It is, I have been guilty of this. So I think I was in like 7th grade, and I was getting into like this war of words with this girl. And of course, you know how school kids are. You gonna let her talk to you like that? You gonna let her say that to you? You gonna let her talk shit about you like that? And it was just like the height of the moment, fever pitch or whatever. And I reached out and I hit this girl, and we ended up fighting, and I ended up suspended from school. And you know what I thought about in that 3-day suspension? The people that were egging me on, yeah, girl, you gonna let her talk about you? Yeah, girl, all the kids that was, riling us up. You know where they were the next day? In school, getting educated, going on about their business. Another day, another dollar. It was just like their lives had gone on, but I was the one experiencing the punishments. And I think about January 6th, right? Not our best day. Okay, like not America's best day by a long shot. And I think about the people who lost their jobs, the people who went to jail, all kinds of just natural consequences of their actions, right? And the people that were egging them on, that were stoking the fight, that were riling them up, you know where they were? On a boat, on a golf course, eating bonbons and caviar. Like, they had gone on with life. But other people had suffered the real consequences. People died that day. Okay. And people's lives were irrevocably changed. Okay. People lost loved ones that day. People lost their livelihood that day. People lost their marriages that day. And this isn't like, oh, boo hoo, play me violin, that's what they get. This isn't that. Like, again, this is the zoom out conversation. Okay. This is the zoom out conversation. The zoom out conversation is that the people that engineer the anger, the people that are stoking these fires, are not suffering the consequences because they're still going to Thanksgiving dinners with their families. They are still benefiting and profiting and grifting and receiving the benefits of our collective outrage. And I think at some point you kind of got to take a step back and say, what am I doing? Is this who I am? And it's almost always when, the cage of consequence comes slamming down, you're suddenly brought back to clarity. Okay. So like when I got suspended from middle school, and I was sitting up there on the suspension, and, my mom was all mad at me, and I was on punishment and things like that. Yeah. You have some time to think about your actions. You have some time to think about, now, how did I get here? And what led me down this path? And I'm trying to keep us from getting to that point, okay? So many of us have experienced the consequences. Many of us are living the consequences. Many of us are dangerously close to the consequences. And I'm just encouraging all of us to take a beat, to take a breath, to take a step back, to zoom out and really look at what this is costing us, not just how we're feeling, but who we're collectively becoming. Which brings me to my third and final point, getting out. So here's the thing. You can at any time say, I want off this ride. I want off this ride. Rich Logis, he talks about this with his Leaving MAGA movement. And I think he wrote a book too. I'm not sure about that. I'll double check. But I think he wrote a book about how he got into the movement and how he got out of the movement. But essentially, he said that what finally kind of like allowed the scales to fall from his eyes was diversifying his news sources, that he stopped listening to the one source of his news and he started kind of step back and looked at other news sources, and the logical part of his brain started to kind of reactivate. Okay, so instead of the emotional parts, it was more like the logical parts, and he started to realize that a lot of what he believed and a lot of what he consumed was coming from this very specific echo chamber. And so I want to put that in front of you. Where are you getting your news from? Where are you getting your ideas about relationships from? Because you know the algorithm feeds you what you already eat, right? Like it doesn't, once upon a time, before we got here, your feed used to be more diverse, okay? Like your Instagram feed used to be more diverse. Your TikTok feed used to be more diverse. Your YouTube feed used to be more diverse. But once you start to kind of like consume a certain kind of content, then it keeps feeding you that same content. And so the key for him was diversifying his content. So when you think about the ideas that you have and how they're being shaped, shaped by whom? Shaped in what spaces, with what voices? And are you consistently listening to the same voices, or are you diversifying? Okay. Are you getting your and forming your impressions about life and love and experience and politics from one space and primarily on the internet, instead of assessing in real life and experiencing in real life? Because that makes a difference. That makes a difference. One of the things he said at the end of the news clip, he said, is that he realized that regardless of political differences, he said, there's a lot more that we agree on than we disagree on. And it was a sobering realization for him, because he was under the impression that people were out to get him and that they were out to take what was his. And he realized that by actually getting out of that echo chamber and actually getting back into real life, by getting back out into real life and having data, okay, experiential data from which to cross-reference what he was hearing, it broke him out of that cycle. So it broke him out of that system. And whenever I talk about or hear stories about people leaving certain movements or what have you, there's a lot of angry responses. F these people. You know, I will never forgive this. And these people, I don't care if they leave the movement, they're still racist. They're still this, they're still that, they're still the other. Right. Here's the thing. There's a lot at stake in America right now, namely free and fair elections. So in the midterms, every Republican and Democratic seat in the House of Representatives is up for re-election. That doesn't happen all the time. Okay, so every seat is literally up for grabs. Don't you think we need to be clear-headed? Don't you think that we need to approach this with some calm, with some data, with some strategic alignment, rather than with anger and vitriol and emotion? I think so, because the stakes are really high. And regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, regardless of what your values are, I think that too many of us are heading to the ballot box armed with emotion, rather than armed with data. Okay, there are a lot of people, and not just in this past election cycle, but through many election cycles, that will say things like, oh, well, this isn't what I voted for, or I didn't think it was going to be like this. And, but the data was there. The information was there. It was there and it was available. And so this brings me back to this question: where are you getting your information from? In what ways are you consuming data? In what ways are you forming your impressions about the world? Okay, not just in politics, but about friendship and community and love and all the things. Okay, I think it is very important for us to recognize that we can get off this ride. It is very important for us to recognize that we can take a step back, that this doesn't have to be who we are, this doesn't have to be what we feel. And let me be very, very clear. There's a lot in the world to be angry and upset about. There's a lot of injustice, there's a lot of abuse, there's a lot of humanitarian crisis, there's a lot to be righteously angry about. But what we rarely see is us collectively holding the people, the groups, the systems that are collectively responsible for a lot of that suffering. And instead, we're fighting one another. And I think that's the point. I think that is the point. And so I stepped off this ride. And so I stepped off that ride. I stopped listening to mainstream media and I started to pursue independent journalism, people that were going to ask the hard questions, people that were going to hold our leaders accountable. And that to me has been a much better experience. Okay. I think that has allowed me to see a much broader picture of what's going on. And it allows me to be better informed and better equipped when I head into the next election cycle, but it also allows me to be better informed and better equipped when I talk to people. So I don't talk from this us versus them perspective. I talk from a here's a problem that's affecting you, and here's a problem that's affecting me. So do you want to work together to solve the problem rather than working to collectively destroy and dismantle one another? And I think that in the long run, that is the better, healthier approach for us all. So let me close by saying, with clarity, this is not me saying, hey, let's forgive and forget. Hey, bygones and bygones, that's all water under the bridge. Let's just let that all go. Because people have experienced some very real consequences from choices that have been made at the policy level, and that anger is real. That hurt is real. The consequences are real. People have lost jobs. People have lost benefits. Okay. People have lost access to education and career. So this isn't that. This isn't me saying, let's just sweep it all under the rug. What I am saying is, let's think it through. Let's find a way forward. Let's recognize that our anger is being farmed, that the worst parts of ourselves, the worst parts of humanity are being amplified and engineered through bots, through paid actors, through bad actors, through grifters. And we are all collectively paying a price. Meanwhile, the engineers are off toasting champagne and floating away on yachts and golden parachutes and all the rest of it. I think we all can aspire to something higher than being angry all the time. I'll see you next time.